Games, and I recently got a chance at E3 to go hands-on with a big half-hour chunk of Batman Arkham Knight, the latest game in the series by Rocksteady. Now, those of you who've been following the series closely know that Arkham City and Arkham Asylum were the two ones created by Rocksteady, but then the third game was not actually developed by them, Arkham Origins. This is them again. They've been hard at work on this actual next-gen installment of it, and I think the first thing that I should say about it is that it looks just absolutely gorgeous. The opening cutscene they showed me, actually, the one you may have seen with his sort of armor building together in different chunks, had a lot of compression on it in the demo I saw. Like, it was clearly a pre-rendered thing, but they insisted that is in-game and in-engine, so maybe it won't look like that when the game comes out. However, everything after that point looked just seriously lovely, super dark. Every time that a camera got like really close to his armor or his shoulder or a wall, it just, none of the graininess that you sort of expect from third-person action games is present in this version. So the major change that they're touting in Arkham Knight is that there is the Batmobile, and if you had asked me whether or not they should put a Batmobile in the Arkham games, I probably would have told you no, and I kind of still stand by that position. I think that what they have done a good job of is making it unobtrusive. I think it is a bad idea executed well. So the Batmobile is really, really easy to use. The tank control stuff that you can do by holding one of the triggers lets you strafe and move like an actual third-person action game, which makes it a lot less of a pain in the ass. You can also always hit L1 at any time to hop right into the Batmobile. So everything about it is made to be as convenient as possible. I'm just not convinced that the idea should have been put in the game in the first place. The way that they think about it internally is as a gadget in Batman's arsenal, like anything else that he has. And I think when you look at it that way, it's totally fine. You just end up doing a lot of silly stuff where, like, there's one part where you need to get to a ramp, so you fly up, get controls for the ramp, and then lower the ramp so that you can ride up the ramp with the Batmobile and get it somewhere else, which is kind of at odds with the fact that you can make the Batmobile basically teleport to you at any time, but I digress. The Batmobile is also kind of lame in that whenever you run over enemies with it, it just instantly electrocutes them and stuns them and knocks them out, which feels at odds with the Batman combat that I love so much. What I can say, though, is that the actual standard Batman third-person flying, punching, all that stuff feels exactly the way you want it to. They've made some pretty interesting advancements to the combat since Arkham City. One cool thing is that there are now environmental takedowns. So when you're in the right place with Batman, you can hit, I believe it is X and square on the PS4 controller to grab an opponent and throw them into, say, an electrical box or out a window or pull down something like a vent and slam it on them. Kind of stuff that you've seen in other games before that have been ripoffs of the Batman games. So like the Sleeping Dogs combat did this really well, but now it is in Batman and it flows seamlessly with the rest of the Batman combat. Likewise, you can pick up weapons on the ground now. So there was at one point I was near an enemy who had dropped a baseball bat, so I picked up that baseball bat and just whacked 3 dudes with it. And when you step back and think about the idea of Batman just beating the shit out of people with a baseball bat, it feels maybe a little out of character for the hero, but again, it actually felt good and sort of gave you quicker takedowns than you would normally have and just made the combat interesting and mixed up in another new way. One other thing they do is that when you are in a position to do a takedown, say under a grate or above opponents, there's a new thing called a fear takedown, and how this works is you charge it up by getting traditional stealth takedowns, and you can chain these attacks together. So let's say there are 3 enemies standing in close proximity of each other and you have a fear takedown available. You swoop down on one of them, take him out, the game goes into super slow motion and you pan the camera to the next one. Press square again to chain it into that guy, press square again to chain it into the third guy, all in slow motion, so you just took out 3 dudes really, really quickly. It almost, I think I said this before, but it almost reminds me of the mark and execute system from Splinter Cell. But it's a little bit more involved than that. It's a little bit less press button to kill dudes and a little bit more active. Like, you can flub it up if you're not careful. Now, one of my favorite things about the Arkham games has always been traversing the city, and one way that they've sort of improved that this time is allowing you to chain grapples together. And what that means is that if you're scaling a building, which you'll be doing a lot of in this game, you can press the bumper to grapple as usual, and then go ahead and grapple to the next surface without having to stop and do it all over again. So it's a little bit more seamless. And the reason they did this, they told me, is because the game has a lot more verticality to it now. They want real full-size skyscrapers like the one you saw at the beginning of the press conference demo, and being able to scale those seamlessly is kind of an important thing. It also seems like you can grapple from much, much further away than in the previous games, and they confirmed that with me, which is also really nice. Speaking of the city itself, Gotham is apparently 5 times larger than the Gotham you saw in Arkham City here, which isn't inherently a good thing. I don't necessarily always buy that bigger is better, but the world is just gorgeous and sprawling, and as long as they fill it with enough content and make it feel like a city, which I don't think Arkham City ever really did, I'm in. Lastly, I feel like I should talk about the Batmobile combat. Now, when you are in the battle mode as the Batmobile, you have this strafing ability that I mentioned earlier, where the wheels basically turn sideways and allow you to control it like a tank, I guess, is the closest comparison. That combat is fine. It's really, really pretty. I mean, there are particle effects everywhere, sparks flying, blues and yellows, and it's just gorgeous. It's just not necessarily fun or what I come to these games for. I asked them in what way this combat had anything to do with the Batman Arkham games, and what they told me was there is a sort of combo system. So by chaining together dodges and not getting hit and stuff and narrowly dodging missiles, you have all these options at your disposal to kind of make chains that are supposedly meant to resemble the chains that you have in normal hand-to-hand Arkham combat. Frankly, I am still a little out on whether or not that's going to be a fun thing. They'd have to complicate it a lot. I still just think that core Batman combat is so good and so interesting that I don't really want to get in a tank. I would rather get out of the vehicle and punch dudes than run them over with a car, but that's just me as a really, really big fan of that standard Arkham combat. This game is coming out sometime in 2015. I don't think we have any more specifics than that, and I'm very, very excited. So yeah, that's what I thought of my time with Arkham Knight. Again, Batmobile stuff wasn't terribly compelling, but it also wasn't terribly offensive either. It's just kind of there, and as a means to get from one place to another, it is actually pretty cool. Let us know what you think of Arkham Knight in the comments. I am anticipating it, but anticipating it for the Batman combat reasons and the navigation by flight reasons and not the driving around in a Batmobile reasons, at least so far, until they give me a reason to think otherwise. But yeah, I'll be hanging out in the comments and letting you know what I thought of my time with Batman there if you have any specific games. And I recently got a chance at E3 to go hands-on with a big half-hour chunk of Batman Arkham Knight, the latest game in the series by Rocksteady. Now, those of you who've been following the series closely know that Arkham City and Arkham Asylum were the two ones created by Rocksteady, but then the third game was not actually developed by them, Arkham Origins. This is them again. They've been hard at work on this actual next-gen installment of it, and I think the first thing that I should say about it is that it looks just absolutely gorgeous. The opening cutscene they showed me, actually, the one you may have seen with his sort of armor building together in different chunks, had a lot of compression on it in the demo I saw. Like, it was clearly a pre-rendered thing, but they insisted that is in-game and in-engine, so maybe it won't look like that when the game comes out. However, everything after that point looked just seriously lovely, super dark. Every time that a camera got like really close to his armor or his shoulder or a wall, it just, none of the graininess that you sort of expect from third-person action games is present in this version. So the major change that they're touting in Arkham Knight is that there is the Batmobile, and if you had asked me whether or not they should put a Batmobile in the Arkham games, I probably would have told you no, and I kind of still stand by that position. I think that what they have done a good job of is making